Today, we're counting down 10 Florida cities and rapidly expanding communities where newly built homes are quietly accumulating on the market in 2026. Some of these areas continue adding new inventory at an aggressive pace even as completed homes sit vacant. Others have watched entire phases of development slow dramatically compared to the expectations builders had only a few years ago. As we move deeper into the list, a clear pattern begins to emerge. The further you go, the easier it becomes to see the forces reshaping Florida's housing market right now. And trust me, the examples ahead become far more surprising as the countdown continues. Number 10. Lakeland. Located in the heart of Polk County, Lakeland is home to around 120,000 residents and occupies a strategic position between Tampa and Orlando along the busy Interstate 4 corridor. In many ways, it has become one of Florida's most revealing examples of what can happen when a city is marketed as an affordable alternative to two major metropolitan areas at the same time. For years, Lakeland offered exactly what many buyers felt they could no longer find in either Tampa or Orlando. Homes were newer, lots were larger, neighborhoods felt less crowded, and prices remained significantly more attractive. On top of that, residents had access to two of the state's strongest and fastest-growing employment markets. Developers quickly recognized the potential. New housing communities spread across the northern and southern sections of the city, as well as into the surrounding outskirts. The sales pitch practically sold itself. Buyers could enjoy a larger home for a lower price while remaining within reach of both Tampa and Orlando. Commute when necessary, work remotely when possible, and enjoy a more affordable lifestyle in between. For a period of time, that strategy worked exceptionally well. During the pandemic housing boom, demand surged beyond what many expected. Remote workers poured into the area. Families who had been priced out of Tampa began looking eastward for opportunities. At the same time, buyers from Orlando started exploring options farther west. Investors also entered the market in large numbers, convinced that growth would continue indefinitely. Seeing the momentum, builders increased construction and launched new projects at an accelerated pace. Then reality began catching up with the numbers. The Interstate 4 commute that appeared reasonable on paper became much less appealing once offices reopened and daily traffic returned to pre-pandemic levels. Meanwhile, mortgage rates climbed, increasing monthly housing costs. Insurance premiums continued rising, adding even more pressure to household budgets. Many buyers also realized that the purchase price advertised by builders represented only part of the financial picture. The true cost of ownership included mortgage payments, insurance, property taxes, homeowner association dues, community development district fees in certain neighborhoods, utility expenses, and the ongoing cost of commuting along one of Florida's busiest transportation corridors. As a result, builders throughout Lakeland have been forced to compete more aggressively for buyers. Incentives have become increasingly common, including mortgage rate buydowns, assistance with closing costs, complimentary upgrades, appliance packages, and direct price reductions on completed homes that are ready for occupancy. Number 9. St. Cloud. Located in Osceola County just southeast of Orlando, St. Cloud sits near Lake Nona, Orlando International Airport, and the rapidly developing Narcossi corridor. Over the past decade, it has become one of Central Florida's most ambitious new home construction markets and a prime example of how quickly growth can reshape a community. For years, the formula seemed almost guaranteed to succeed. Orlando's population continued expanding. Lake Nona kept attracting new businesses and residents, and employment tied to the airport steadily increased. Families were searching for modern homes, and St. Cloud offered something increasingly difficult to find closer to the city: available land. Developers wasted little time taking advantage of the opportunity. Large master-planned communities began replacing former ranches and pasture land. New schools were built, road projects moved forward, shopping centers followed residential growth, and buyers who could no longer afford some of Orlando's more desirable areas started moving deeper into Osceola County. When the pandemic housing boom arrived, demand accelerated even further. Remote workers flooded into the market looking for larger homes and more space. Investors saw an opportunity and started purchasing properties. At the same time, relocation buyers from the Northeast and South Florida arrived in growing numbers. Demand appeared endless, and builders responded exactly as expected. More phases were launched, additional communities broke ground, and home prices continued climbing. Eventually, however, the wave of eager buyers began to shrink. Affordability became the first major obstacle. A home that seemed comfortably within reach during 2021 looked very different once higher interest rates dramatically increased monthly mortgage payments in 2026. Insurance created another challenge. Florida buyers have become far more conscious of insurance costs than they were just a few years ago. What was once viewed as a minor expense is now a major factor in nearly every purchasing decision. Buyers are paying close attention not just to the home's listing price, but to the complete monthly cost after insurance, taxes, and other expenses are included. Then there is the issue of transportation and congestion. Number 8. Ocala. Situated in Marion County along the Interstate 75 corridor, Ocala is a north-central Florida city with a population of roughly 65,000 residents. For many years, it stood out as one of Florida's most attractive affordability success stories, offering buyers an alternative to the state's increasingly expensive metropolitan and coastal markets. Ocala had several advantages working in its favor. It offered abundant land for development, a nationally recognized horse country reputation, a strong retirement market, and a growing collection of age-restricted communities designed for active adults. Most importantly, housing costs remained well below those found in places like Orlando, Tampa, Sarasota, and much of South Florida. For buyers seeking the Florida lifestyle without paying premium coastal prices, Ocala became an increasingly attractive option. Then the pandemic transformed the market. As remote work became more common, buyers who no longer needed to live near major employment centers began searching for affordable alternatives. Retirees accelerated their relocation plans. Investors started targeting inland Florida communities, and demand surged throughout the region. Builders quickly recognized the opportunity and responded by expanding construction across the area. New subdivisions spread outward from the city, and developers marketed communities around a simple but effective message: modern homes, lower monthly costs, more space, and a quieter pace of life compared to Florida's larger urban centers. For a time, that strategy delivered exactly the results builders hoped for. Today, however, Ocala is confronting many of the same challenges affecting inland housing markets throughout Florida. The affordability edge that once drove much of the area's growth has become noticeably smaller. Insurance premiums have risen significantly. Mortgage payments are far higher than they were just a few years ago. Property tax bills have increased for many homeowners as assessed values reset upward. At the same time, the gap between local wages and the cost of newly built homes has widened enough that it can no longer be overlooked. That is where the issue of growing unsold inventory begins. The appeal of Ocala itself has not disappeared. Buyers still appreciate the larger properties, the open space, the slower pace of life, and the availability of modern new homes. But appreciation alone does not close transactions. If the monthly payment stretches beyond what a household can comfortably afford, interest does not automatically turn into a sale. As a result, builders have become increasingly dependent on incentives to keep potential buyers coming through their communities. Mortgage rate buydowns, assistance with closing costs, appliance packages, flexible financing programs, and price reductions on move-in-ready homes have all become common tools in the effort to move inventory. Number 7. Davenport. Located in Polk County southwest of Orlando, Davenport sits near the world-famous Disney tourism corridor and is surrounded by some of the most active residential development in Central Florida. Over the past several years, few places better captured Florida's housing frenzy than this rapidly expanding community. What makes Davenport unique is that three major housing trends converged here at the same time: the vacation home boom, the investor-driven buying surge, and the explosion of new construction all fueled one another, creating extraordinary demand and encouraging builders to expand at an aggressive pace. For years, the sales pitch was incredibly compelling. Buyers could purchase a newly built home close to Orlando's attractions while paying significantly less than they would in neighboring Orange County. Many communities offered resort-style amenities, vacation villas, townhomes, pool properties, and neighborhoods specifically designed to appeal to tourists and short-term rental guests. To many buyers, the numbers appeared almost impossible to ignore. Tourism remained strong. Disney continued attracting millions of visitors each year, and the belief that vacation rentals would generate reliable income became a major force driving purchases throughout the area. Then the pandemic housing boom added even more fuel to the market. Families searched for larger homes with more space. Investors rushed into short-term rentals hoping to capitalize on growing travel demand. Remote workers relocated to Florida in record numbers. Out-of-state buyers saw an opportunity to own a property that could function both as a personal vacation retreat and as an income-producing investment. Developers responded exactly as expected. New subdivisions spread rapidly throughout the corridor. Entire neighborhoods were planned with investors and vacation rental owners in mind. Construction accelerated as builders raced to meet what appeared to be unlimited demand. Eventually, however, the economics that supported the boom began to shift. The short-term rental market became increasingly crowded as more properties entered the system. Competition grew, making it harder for owners to command premium nightly rates. At the same time, operating expenses continued moving in the opposite direction. Insurance costs increased. Property taxes rose. HOA fees climbed higher. Cleaning services became more expensive. Maintenance expenses grew, and management companies charged larger fees. Every additional cost placed more pressure on the profitability calculations that had once looked so attractive. Meanwhile, higher mortgage rates dramatically changed the numbers for many investors. Number 6. Palm Bay. Palm Bay, located in Brevard County just south of Melbourne along Florida's Space Coast, is home to approximately 130,000 residents. In many ways, it has become one of the state's most significant new construction housing markets, largely because it still possessed something that was becoming increasingly rare along Florida's coastline: abundant buildable land. For years, Palm Bay filled a very specific role in the market. It offered buyers a more affordable way to live near the Space Coast's major employment centers, beaches, and growing aerospace industry. Those who wanted access to Melbourne, the Kennedy Space Center region, and the area's expanding technology and defense sectors often found that Palm Bay provided an option that felt far more attainable than many neighboring coastal communities. Developers quickly recognized that opportunity. Neighborhood by neighborhood and lot by lot, new homes began spreading across large sections of the city. The marketing message was straightforward and effective. Buyers could purchase brand new construction at prices lower than many waterfront or beachside locations while still enjoying access to the region's job market, outdoor lifestyle, and growing economy. Larger lots, more living space, and a lower cost of entry made Palm Bay increasingly attractive compared to South Florida and many Gulf Coast markets. Then the pandemic housing surge pushed demand even higher. Remote workers arrived from around the country. Out-of-state buyers poured into Florida. Investors entered the market searching for opportunities. At the same time, continued growth within the Space Coast's aerospace and technology sectors gave builders confidence that demand would remain strong for years to come. For a while, that confidence appeared justified. But by 2026, the market looks very different. The fundamentals that attracted people to Palm Bay still exist. The employment base remains strong, population growth continues, and the area still benefits from its connection to Florida's Space Coast economy. The difference is that buyers have become far more careful about their decisions. Higher mortgage rates have significantly increased monthly payments. Insurance costs have risen across Florida. Meanwhile, years of aggressive construction have left buyers with far more choices than they had during the height of the housing boom. That growing number of options is becoming one of the market's biggest challenges. A buyer searching for a home in Palm Bay is no longer limited to a handful of available properties. Instead, they can compare multiple communities, multiple builders, various floor plans, different price ranges, and a wide assortment of incentives. Number 5. Port St. Lucie. With a population exceeding 230,000 residents, Port St. Lucie has become one of the largest and fastest-growing cities on Florida's Treasure Coast. Positioned between Palm Beach County and the Space Coast, it spent years serving as one of the state's most successful housing expansion stories. In many ways, the city grew exactly as developers envisioned, until rising ownership costs began changing the equation. For a long time, Port St. Lucie functioned as a pressure release valve for South Florida's increasingly expensive housing market. Buyers who found Palm Beach County out of reach started looking farther north. Retirees searching for modern homes and master-planned communities discovered attractive options throughout the city. Families were drawn by newer schools, larger homes, well-maintained parks, and neighborhoods that offered more value for the money. Then, developments such as Tradition helped elevate Port St. Lucie from a growing city into a full-scale residential powerhouse. The appeal was easy to understand. New construction neighborhoods offered modern homes, organized community planning, expanding retail districts, healthcare facilities, and convenient access to both Interstate 95 and the Florida Turnpike. Residents could enjoy a quieter lifestyle than South Florida while still remaining close enough to major employment centers, shopping, and coastal attractions. When the pandemic housing boom arrived, growth accelerated dramatically. Out-of-state buyers flooded into the area. Many South Florida residents relocated north in search of affordability. Retirees continued arriving in large numbers, and builders responded by expanding projects, opening new phases, and increasing construction activity. Home values climbed rapidly, and for a period of time it seemed as though every new neighborhood found eager buyers almost immediately. That environment has changed considerably. The demand has not disappeared, but buyer behavior has. Today's buyer is still interested in owning a home in Port St. Lucie. The difference is that they no longer feel pressured to make a decision immediately. During the height of the boom, many people worried that waiting even a few months could mean paying substantially more. In 2026, that sense of urgency has largely faded. Instead, buyers are focusing on the total cost of ownership. A family considering a newly built home must now evaluate far more than the purchase price. Monthly mortgage payments are significantly higher than they were just a few years ago. Insurance costs continue to rise across Florida. Property taxes, homeowner association dues, community development district fees in certain neighborhoods, transportation expenses, and other ongoing costs all factor into the decision. Number 4. Northport. Located in Sarasota County between Sarasota and Port Charlotte, Northport is a city of approximately 85,000 residents positioned along one of Southwest Florida's fastest-growing development corridors. As we move higher on this list, the story becomes noticeably more significant because Northport is dealing with several powerful housing market forces at the same time. This is no longer simply a case of slower sales activity. Here, the effects of the pandemic housing surge, rising insurance costs, lingering concerns about hurricanes, and an expanding supply of newly built homes are all converging in the same market. For many years, Northport was viewed as one of Southwest Florida's best affordability opportunities. Homebuyers who found Sarasota too expensive often looked south. Those seeking alternatives to Venice and other coastal communities discovered that Northport offered newer homes at lower prices while still providing access to beaches, healthcare facilities, shopping centers, and many of the retirement amenities that attract people to Florida in the first place. Developers were especially attracted to the area because there was still substantial land available for construction. Buyers appreciated the comparatively reasonable home prices, while retirees saw an opportunity to enjoy a modern Florida lifestyle without paying premium waterfront or luxury market prices. Then came the pandemic housing boom. Demand surged almost overnight. Home values climbed rapidly, builders accelerated construction, and out-of-state buyers arrived in large numbers. For a period of time, Northport looked like one of Florida's next major success stories, with growth appearing almost unstoppable. But eventually, market conditions began to change. Insurance costs rose sharply throughout Florida, and Southwest Florida was hit particularly hard by growing concerns over storm risk and property protection costs. Mortgage rates remained elevated, making monthly payments far less affordable than they had been during the boom years. At the same time, buyers became increasingly cautious and far more focused on risk than they were just a few years earlier. Number 3. Punta Gorda. Punta Gorda is a waterfront community in Charlotte County, positioned along Charlotte Harbor between Fort Myers and Sarasota. It has long been considered one of Southwest Florida's more peaceful coastal cities, offering a slower pace of life and easy access to the water. For many years, it represented the classic Florida coastal dream. Canals, boating access, golf courses, retirement neighborhoods, and quiet residential streets defined its appeal. Winters were warm, the environment felt relaxed, and the city was often viewed as a calmer, more affordable alternative to Florida's larger coastal metros. During the pandemic housing boom, that appeal became even more powerful. Retirees accelerated relocation plans. Remote workers arrived seeking lifestyle changes. Investors entered the market looking for appreciation and rental potential. Developers expanded into new communities, and buyers who wanted Southwest Florida living without Naples-level pricing began focusing heavily on Punta Gorda. For a time, demand surged strongly. But then the underlying conditions shifted. The first major pressure point became insurance. In coastal Florida, insurance is no longer a minor monthly expense. It has become one of the most critical factors in any home purchase decision. Costs have risen significantly, and buyers are now forced to evaluate coverage very carefully before committing. The second issue is storm exposure and long-term risk perception. After repeated hurricane seasons and increasingly expensive repair cycles, buyers have become far more cautious. Details like roof condition, elevation level, flood zone classification, and wind coverage now play a central role in whether a property feels worth the price. The third factor is inventory. Punta Gorda and the broader Charlotte County area expanded aggressively during the boom years. Builders moved quickly, adding large volumes of new construction. When demand began to cool, those homes did not disappear. They remained on the market, gradually accumulating into visible supply. This is why the market in 2026 feels noticeably different. The homes are still attractive. The waterfront lifestyle is still desirable. The natural surroundings remain one of the strongest draws in the region. But buyers are no longer accepting pricing without carefully weighing the full cost and risk profile of ownership. As a result, builders are increasingly relying on incentives to maintain momentum. Mortgage rate buydowns, closing cost assistance, complimentary upgrades, and price reductions on completed inventory have become standard tools to attract buyers and move unsold homes. Number 2. Cape Coral. Cape Coral is located in Lee County, positioned across the Caloosahatchee River from Fort Myers. It stands out as one of the most recognizable examples of Florida's new home slowdown because, more than almost any other city, it was essentially designed for continuous expansion. With its extensive canal system, tens of thousands of vacant lots, and decades of large-scale residential development, Cape Coral has long been considered one of the most active construction markets in the entire state. For years, the city's housing story was incredibly strong. Buyers could purchase new homes near waterfront canals, stay close to Fort Myers and Gulf Coast beaches, and still pay prices that were often lower than many other coastal Florida markets. That combination of affordability, access to water, and ongoing development made Cape Coral extremely attractive. When the pandemic housing surge began, that momentum intensified dramatically. Buyers from the Northeast moved in. Retirees relocated in large numbers. Investors entered aggressively. Builders expanded rapidly. Speculative construction increased. Even lot buyers began building at a faster pace, all driven by the belief that demand would remain strong indefinitely. For a time, it felt like the city had no ceiling. But eventually, the cost structure began to shift. Insurance premiums rose sharply. Flood and wind coverage became more expensive and more restrictive. Roofing requirements tightened. Property taxes increased. Mortgage payments climbed with higher interest rates. At the same time, a growing number of newly built homes entered the market, all competing for the same pool of buyers. The issue in Cape Coral is not a lack of interest. People still want to live there. The lifestyle, the waterfront access, and the proximity to Fort Myers remain highly desirable. The real challenge is that buyers now face an overwhelming number of options, and just as many reasons to hesitate. Driving through parts of the city makes the situation easy to see. New construction is everywhere. One builder is finishing homes on a street corner, another is developing just a few blocks away. Spec homes sit completed nearby, while price reductions appear across canals. In some neighborhoods, finished houses stand empty, with no furniture, no cars, and no signs of immediate occupancy. That visual shift has changed buyer psychology. During the boom years, buyers were driven by urgency and fear of missing out. In 2026, that emotion has been replaced by caution. Instead of rushing to buy, many are waiting, comparing, and trying to avoid overpaying in a cooling market. Number 1. Lehigh Acres. Lehigh Acres is a large, unincorporated community in Lee County, located east of Fort Myers in southwest Florida. Among all the inland and coastal markets in the state, it stands out as one of the clearest and most visible examples of the current new construction oversupply problem. For many years, Lehigh Acres was considered one of Florida's most accessible entry points into homeownership. It offered inexpensive land, relatively low home prices compared to coastal markets, proximity to Fort Myers job opportunities, steady population growth, and enough undeveloped lots to keep construction activity going for a long time. When the pandemic housing boom began, the area became a major target for buyers priced out of nearby cities like Naples, Cape Coral, and Fort Myers. Builders arrived quickly and in large numbers. Small local builders, national developers, spec builders, and investor-backed construction groups all moved in at once. Land was cleared at a rapid pace, foundations were poured continuously, and entire streets of new homes began appearing across previously undeveloped land. The message being sold was straightforward: brand new homes at relatively affordable prices, more space, a Florida lifestyle, and convenient access to Fort Myers. For a while, that message worked extremely well. Then the buyer environment shifted. Mortgage rates increased, insurance costs rose significantly, and investor demand began to cool. Out-of-state buyers became more cautious, and local income levels were not able to support unlimited price growth. Over time, the type of buyer that had fueled the boom became much harder to find. And that is the core issue in Lehigh Acres today. The community was effectively built for a demand profile that no longer exists at the same scale. A buyer willing to accept higher insurance premiums, higher monthly payments, longer commutes, and continued appreciation in home values. That version of the buyer has largely stepped back. As a result, many areas of Lehigh Acres are now filled with newly constructed homes competing for attention. It is easy to see on the ground: builder signs throughout neighborhoods, spec homes sitting completed, price reductions appearing on listings, and freshly landscaped properties with empty driveways and no residents inside. Because development is spread across so many individual lots rather than concentrated in a single master-planned community, the oversupply is highly visible and widespread. Instead of one project slowing down, it is happening everywhere at once. Street after street where builders are effectively competing against each other, against resale homes, and against the monthly cost burden facing buyers.